Welcome to We Are Old, Get Over It, the podcast where we celebrate the wisdom of age and maybe a little grumbling too. Okay. In 2004, J.K. Rowling saw a photograph in the London Sunday Times of a young boy in the Czech Republic being kept in a caged bed in a large institution. Disturbed by the image, she co-founded the charity in 2005. It was initially called Children's High Level Group and later was renamed Loomis, L-U-M-O-S, after the light-giving spell in Harry Potter. So if you didn't know her name, I don't know how you would not know the name of Harry Potter. So besides being a prolific writer, she has created a legacy project. And that legacy project is Loomis. And Loomis is celebrating, I think its 20th year in operation. I'm going to just get started with that, but I generally start with something else, but I wanted to give that setting so you understand what we're talking about. I'm going to do an introduction right now. So now I'm going to start out with my regular stuff, folks. Okay, here we go. Welcome back to We Are Old, Get Over It. I'm your host, Ken Gluckman. If you don't know that, okay. As we get older, many of us start thinking about legacy. We have the time, we have the resources, we have a genuine heart for giving those less fortunate, especially children. It's why Voluntourism has become a multi-billion-dollar industry with thousands of seniors heading overseas every year to volunteer in orphanages. Okay, but why? But what if the very thing you're doing to help is actually fueling a system of exploitation? What if those children aren't actually orphans? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the dark side of the orphanage tourism. Joining us is Ashlyn Ledwith. Did I do that right? Did I do it half right or all right? Oh, good. I've been practicing that. From Loomis, an organization dedicated to ending the institutionalization of children worldwide. We're going to discuss the link between tourism and child trafficking. And more importantly, how you can use your skills and your heart and your money to make a difference without causing unintended harm. So let's get to it. And as you know, if you've listened to my podcast before, I always start out with a quote. And I have a quote here of my 40 or 50 pages of my notes. Okay. Institutionalization is one of the worst things you can do to children in the world. It renders children vulnerable to abuse and trafficking, and it is massively impacting their life chances. The effect on children is universally poor. And that is a direct quote, if I'm not mistaken, from J.K. Rowling, one of the founders of Loomis. And with that, I'm going to introduce a young lady, and I'm going to turn the podcast over to her, and I'll just, butt in when I feel like it. Ashlyn, why don't you give me a little background of how you ended up where you are and what you do there, and then we'll just get into the discussion of voluntourism. Go ahead.
Sure. That sounds great. Thank you, Ken.
Okay.
It's lovely
It's my
to be
pleasure.
here today.
Thank you.
My name is Ashlyn Ledwith. I work at Lumos. I've been at Lumos for about 8 years now. It feels like quite a long time. I'm part of the advocacy team. We focus on the kind of global advocacy aspect of what Lumos does. So trying to bring what we're learning on the ground in the various countries that we work with, that we work in, and share what we know on a global stage to try and work towards ensuring that decisions are made that will benefit children and that will help children to be able to remain in family-based care where we know that they can thrive. So yes, I've worked at Lumos, as I said, for about 8 years. I've done a lot of different things there over my time, but one of the pieces of work that I'm really proud of is the research that we did on the connections between institutionalization of children and trafficking. So we refer to that as institution-related trafficking. And there are a lot of connections between that issue and voluntourism, which we'll get into today.
Okay, when you're talking about trafficking of children, you're not really talking about taking children from their homes and shipping them overseas like to the United States, correct?
Well, there are actually quite a few different ways that trafficking can intersect with
Mm.
institutionalization. So, in some examples, that may be what happens where children or young people who have just left the care system, particularly institutions, are being trafficked overseas. We know that children who are in institutional care are particularly vulnerable to trafficking for a wide variety of reasons. But whenever it comes to the topic of voluntourism, one of the forms of institution related trafficking we're particularly interested in is often one that remains quite local, where children are being trafficked into false institutions so that they can be exploited financially in the hopes that volunteers or other well meaning people, often from foreign countries, will donate to that orphanage.
Okay, the key word there is donate. Okay. But voluntourism has the word being a volunteer and being a tourist, which basically means you go overseas. So there's a whole business, a multi-billion dollar business, I guess you're going to know much better than I, where there are organizations that are in the United States that say, "Oh, well, come with us, and we're going to build a brick wall in this orphanage." Okay. And it's going to cost you $4,000 to go. And we're going to do this great work. And in the 2 weeks that we're there, you're going to get to know these kids and you're going to get to have this great experience of helping others. And this is a lot of bull, isn't it?
In a lot of ways. I think what I want to stress is that what's not bull is people's good intentions, especially those who
Perfect.
are donating their time and their money. Although the people who are soliciting those donations, it's less easy to tell. In some cases, it's very genuine that people believe what they're doing is helping children. In other cases, not so much.
So it's a trap. It can be a trap.
Yes.
So again, if you do the research, there are organizations that are legitimate and there are organizations that are there to make money, take money, and are basically profiting off children.
Yes. I think one thing that I would like to talk about in the beginning is this issue of institutionalization of children, because I think there are a few things that we want to unpack here, particularly when we're talking about kind of legitimate and illegitimate childcare institutions.
Okay.
So when we think about institutions for children, which are often called orphanages, a lot of these are set up in countries all around the world with very good intentions. Sometimes they're set up by governments, other times they're set up by churches or NGOs, charities, and a lot of the time they are set up with really good intentions to help and support children. Unfortunately, even the ones that are set up with good intentions, that are staffed by very nice people, that are well funded, they are still harmful for children. And that's something that Lumos is aware of, and that the child rights community in general is very aware of after about 80 years worth of research into this topic. That even the best and most well intentioned institution can cause enormous harm to children, to their development in particular. And that's because children, we talk a lot about love, which sounds really nice, but it's really backed up by science that children need a caregiver who is able to provide one-on-one individualized care. And that is a big part of how children grow and learn and develop, from as simple as learning how to walk and how to speak. They do that because they have the support of a caregiver. When children are raised in institutions by staff who are working on shift, who have dozens, if not in some cases hundreds, of other children that they need to care for and also provide support to, they are not receiving the support that they need in order to thrive. And for that reason, we know that no institution is a suitable place for children, for a child to be raised. And children are also much more at risk of harm, abuse, neglect in institutional settings. And about 80% of children living in these institutions have a parent, they have somebody who could care for them. So even though not all institutions are set up in order to elicit donations, in order to make money, I do want to start the conversation by stressing that all institutions are harmful for children. And the community internationally does need to be thinking about how we can find better solutions, which ideally will keep children within their families. And if not, we'll be able to place children in family based care instead of these
So
institutions.
you're trying to get the kids out of these institutions, which you and I might call an orphanage. Uh, One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, and I know you did a study about this, is the word orphanage. An orphanage means you don't have parents. Am I correct? Even in proper English or Irish English, isn't that what it means? But
Yes.
but is that the case with a lot of these in other countries? I mean, it could be here in the United States the same thing, but explain that.
Yeah, so it's a word actually, for most people listening to your podcast, I imagine orphanage is a word they're more used to hearing than institution. But at Lumos, we will usually try and avoid using that term. And that's mostly just because it's incorrect. 80% of children in orphanages have at least one living parent who could care for them. And although the statistic will vary slightly from country to country, that's something we see globally. Children are not being placed in orphanages because there's no one to care for them. They're placed in them for a variety of different reasons. But again, from country to country, we see really similar drivers time and time again. So the major one that we see is poverty. So parents who feel that they can't provide for their children, can't provide food, clothing, education, often feel that their only option is to send their child to live in an institution where they might have access to those things. And just to say as well, when I speak about institutions, it's not necessarily a building a few blocks down the road. It's often very far away, very, very difficult for the parent to ever go and visit their children in that institution. So it is a real act of family separation.
So in other words, it's like sending your kid to camp because
A
when
little
you
bit.
send okay, I mean, not in the same way, but you basically don't you may not have these people may not have the wherewithal to feed their child properly, but they love their child and they feel that they can do better with their child by putting them in quote unquote an institution where they will get hopefully better food, they will be taken care of, and then the parents could at least, even if they're that far away, and I didn't know that there was a big difference aspect of it, but if they're far away, they may not be able to see their children all the time, but at least in their minds, their children are being taken care of. Is that a fact, or is it a falsehood that they're actually being taken care of?
That can depend a lot on the institution. As I said in the beginning, we know that even the best institutions are not beneficial for children. Now, it might be in the immediate beneficial for a child to be receiving regular meals, but the lack of regular parental care is going to be really harmful for any child's development overall. And then there's also the risk that the orphanages that these parents are sending their children to are not, in fact, being set up with the intentions of looking after their children's best interests. In certain contexts, these orphanages are being specifically set up in order to try and solicit donations from volunteers or from people living often in foreign countries who want to give a charitable donation. In order to do that, they will keep these children in poor conditions to encourage those donations. That's the ultimate driver of setting up that institution. So many children who are living in these false institutions, it's because their parent was told, oh, they'll have a better life here. They'll be able to access education. They'll be able to thrive. In other cases, there might be other forms of violence or coercion used to take these children away from their families. But yeah, that's basically a very common scenario that we're seeing.
Okay, so they get removed from their family voluntarily, usually. because of they need to be able to take care of their children, but they obviously can't provide the care that kids really need, like your parents and my parents, whatever we think of our parents. They took care of us, and we are part of what are of their legacy. I'm sorry, mom and dad, but I'm part of your legacy. Anyway, I'm sure you're fine. You're fine, Ash. But, but to be more serious about this, so they're there, and it could be that that it's a very, very good environment, but the majority of them are not very good environments. In fact, I read that, like in Pakistan, there are more orphanages than there are children to put in them. And it's because of voluntourism.
Yes. So
Explain that a little bit. So it's about money. We're basically talking about money. We're not talking about orphans. We're talking about money, right? And you can answer that question, then I have another question for you, okay?
Um, yes, so there is this really strong connection between these false institutions that get set up and tourism and voluntourism. So we actually did a few years ago a bit of a mapping exercise on Kenya where we were able to see that the areas where there were the most orphanages were directly parallel to the areas that were most popular to visit with tourists. So a lot of people when they travel to another country, particularly if that country is maybe a lower income country, they really want to feel like they're helping out while they go there, which, as I say, is very admirable. And they will often do that by volunteering in an orphanage. Now, that might begin, with people volunteering in these kind of genuine institutions which have been set up, even if we know that they are harmful, that have been set up with good intentions. But once people in the local area see that the orphanage is bringing in lots of money through donations, they will start setting up orphanages that are not set up with good intentions, where they are trafficking children in order to make money.
Becomes a business to make money using the children as the draw. But part of the
Yes.
problem is that if you're involved in one of these where you're just a tourist and you want to do good and you're going to be there for 2 weeks and you're going to be helping, in reality, you're really not helping. And the money isn't really going to help the children. It's really going into somebody else's pocket. Am I wrong?
No, you're very, very right. And in a lot of cases, I read a lot of stories as we were putting together the research of volunteers who worked with a particular orphanage for years, and it slowly began to dawn on them that no matter how much money they were donating and bringing in, the material conditions of the children were never changing. And that's because it's not in the interest of the traffickers who have set up the institution to change the conditions of the children, because that might discourage further donations.
Okay, so what your organization is really against voluntourism, correct? And and
Yes.
and your goal is to really try to get money or resources to the families so that the families will keep their children, will be able to keep their children. Is that correct?
Yes. So ideally, the first thing that we really want to do is prevent family separation as much as we can. As I've mentioned, so much of the family separation that we're seeing is because of factors like poverty, a lack of support for disabilities that children have, violence within the community, things like this. So, the more we can do to support families, make sure that they have the money to support their children, make sure that there are services in the local areas that can help them, the more we can keep children within their families. Now, obviously, that's not going to work in 100% of of the cases. We know that there are always going to be families where the children within them are not safe. And at Lumos, we would never ever want a child to remain in any situation where they are not safe. So, alternative care will always be necessary. But what we've seen through research is that family based alternative care is always better for children than institutional alternative.
All right. Another question. Why are seniors targeted?
That's a really interesting question, and I have to say, I wasn't I hadn't really thought about it as something that was targeting seniors in particular. A lot of the research that we did was particularly around young people who were going on a gap year or taking some time off after university and deciding to travel. But I think it does make a lot of sense that seniors might be targeted. A lot of seniors, you've mentioned the word legacy already, are
Hmm.
thinking about how they want to use their money, and particularly they might be thinking about things like wills and what they want to do with that. People going into retirement are also likely to be thinking about, wanting to travel, wanting to give something back. And I think that the idea of an orphanage is something that has long been in a lot of people's consciousness
Mm.
as a kind of basic good. People think of the word orphanage and they think of it as being a positive thing. I think a lot of major religions as well will talk a lot about orphans as a particular group of people who need to be supported. So, a lot of people who are very involved in their church or another religious organization will have this idea of providing help and support to orphans is kind of top of mind when they think about how they want to spend their money. And unfortunately, that word orphanage suggests that the children they're
It's
helping are
it's a
orphans.
hook. It's a hook.
Yeah, it is a hook. Yes.
In other words, there's a marketing going on in the United States and all over. I'm sure that it's in Great Britain also. There's marketing to retirees. There are travel agencies and organizations that package experiences that are heartwarming or life changing, especially for older demographics. And the churches do it also. Now, I don't want to say that a church is doing something to make money. They're hopefully doing something to do good, even though that good isn't really in your philosophy of Loomis. You're
Mhm.
thinking, well, let's get them all out of these orphanages and get them home. Okay, so let's just skip that for a second. But let's get back to what I just brought up, which is there are businesses, tourist offices, advertising that seniors could get in, like an AARP, for example. I'm not saying AARP would do that. They probably check more things. I speak very well and highly of AARP. But if you read a newspaper, you get a magazine, or you get an email and say, you can help change the life of a child, spend 2 weeks in Kenya and all the costs are included, blah, blah, whatever those costs are. This is what the problem seems to be. Or is it just
Now,
one of the problems?
I think that there are a lot of problems. Like, donations to orphanages are coming from a lot of different channels, but certainly I think that I can understand this is a marketing technique. It does sound appealing. It sounds like a win-win to go.
Yes.
Most people like spending time with children. It sounds like a pleasant thing to go and do. But unfortunately that, it is a marketing campaign and it's not necessarily honest.
Right. They go there, they spend some time, they get to take a lot of pictures, and they can come back and tell people, look what I did. I did a nice thing. I felt really good about it. But when they got back on the bus and they leave, the children really aren't any better. And the community isn't necessarily any better because the community is losing the ability. Like, let's say they're going to build a new building. Okay. And these people come along and they're shown how they can put cinder block on cinder block. But in reality, there are people in that country or in that village that know how to do that. And wouldn't it be better to pay those people to do it from a distance and know and have pictures sent to you saying, this is what you paid for? I mean, maybe that's a fraud too. I don't know. But now I'm thinking my brain works in funny ways. So I'm thinking, oh, that's not such a bad idea. We'll take pictures of people putting blocks up, and then we'll say we put the blocks up, but we're using the same blocks we used 3 years ago. But the point being that it's a catch
Hmm.
to Americans and to other countries where the people are well off. There are churches that do it all the time. I mean, I have friends in the past. I never actually thought about it. And they said, oh, our church is going to a certain country, Mozambique, let's say. And they spent a week there or 2 weeks there and they helped. And maybe they did a great job. But what you're saying is there are better ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Let's just
Definitely.
get into the giving back part of it. What are the better ways? And are there organizations out there that can help people to decide what is best?
Sure. I think there are so many different ways to think about this, and I think it depends on the individual and what it is that they really want to do. Because we know that going to volunteer in orphanages is not it's not good. It's not good for any child to be raised by a carousel of people for 2 weeks who leave forever.
Because we didn't talk about the emotional part of it.
Yeah.
You know that if you spend if you spend a week or 2 weeks at a facility of some kind, at a quote unquote an orphanage or some kind of thing like that, at some point you're going to have a connection with a child or a few children. And that's going to be a great thing for you. And in the short term, it's a great thing for them. But when you get on that bus, they don't have that. And they're suffering emotionally for that. You're not, because you've got your family at home and everything else. But that's one of the things you're most concerned with, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's a huge issue. And remember, these are children who already maybe feel that they've been left behind by their parents who don't really understand why they're in an orphanage. And now
Exactly.
they're experiencing this kind of constant unsettlement of people coming in, forming connections, maybe bringing gifts, being very fun, and then leaving, usually forever. And the other thing, linking this back to that topic around exploitation that this
Yes.
does, if you think about, small children, and I think a lot of us have had this experience of a small child in our life who we've seen running around like crazy when they're at home, when they're comfortable, they're very confident. But whenever they meet a new person, they become very shy. They start hiding behind their mother's leg. They're trying to suss out the situation. Parents often feel really apologetic when that happens, but the reality is that's part of development. Children trust their caregiver, and so they are untrusting of new people
Hmm.
until they kind of have the go ahead from their mom or their dad. However, children who are being raised in orphanages by this kind of carousel of volunteers, that lack of trust is being eroded away. They are being taught that they should trust any new person who comes into the institution
Hmm.
to look after them. And that makes them really easy targets for abuse, exploitation, and trafficking, during their whole childhood. And it's one of the reasons why these children are at really high risk of trafficking.
So let's talk about the ethical alternatives
Yes.
to voluntourism. What can seniors, which is basically, as I mentioned earlier, my audience, what can seniors do that would give them the feeling of helping that they can look to in their own lives and say, well, I have a legacy. I'm doing good work, but instead of doing the work of going there, I'm doing the work of dealing with someone reputable that is going to help, such as Loomis, I guess. No, I haven't checked that carefully. I never even looked at your web. I did look at the website once, but but
I
who the heck
promise we're good.
knows? Okay, so how do you find out? So I don't want to put you in trouble here. How do you find out who the right charities are to help? Is there some kind of an association that has certain ratings that has done checks on people? Help me.
So that's going to look different in every part of the world. I live in Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK. So we have the Charities Commission. So there are ways that you can look up and understand a little bit more about the legitimacy of a particular charity. The other thing I would just really encourage people to do is do your research, read around these issues, read a broad range of sources. I mean, the work that we do, the research is backed up. You can cite we've cited all of our sources, but I would
Hmm.
encourage you to read a wide range of different ideas and remain really critical, like be willing to ask questions and challenge things and be willing to do that, when no matter what you're being told. I think that's a big part of it is being willing to ask hard questions. I think
Okay.
something that's really important to prioritize as well is safeguarding for children and thinking about how safeguarding is being approached by the organizations that you work with. It shouldn't be easy to go and get access to children. It should be quite difficult to get yourself in a situation where, you are in a, living or staying in an orphanage. They should be asking for background checks. They should be asking for lots of evidence that you are, who you say you are, that you don't have a criminal record. So I think I would encourage people as well to be quite wary of any
I think there
situation.
are two things that I'd come up with. There's one called Child Safe,
Hmm.
and there was something else called, I think, Rethink Orphanages, which are
Yes.
describe those a little bit because those are readily available. What do? They do basically what you're saying, correct?
Yeah, so organizations like that can be really helpful for just understanding a little bit more about the issue and, where you feel like you can safely put your money. I think the key thing is to think about systems change, think about how we can change the way the children are being cared for at a systemic level, because the problem is a lot of people are seeing this kind of binary: children living in poverty or children living in an orphanage. And we need to be kind of dismantling and breaking that cycle so that we're focusing more on children being protected to live in their families. So I would really encourage people to look for organizations that are keeping children in a family, that are advocating at maybe a local government level within their country for better solutions for children, and that are providing that support. It is also really important to look at organizations that do what Lumos does, which is have local leadership, and work with partners on the ground so that it's not a kind of top down kind of leadership that doesn't have the right context.
Well, let me ask you another question. If someone was planning to spend $3,000 on a volunteer trip to an orphanage, where could that money go instead to have 10 times greater impact on the child's life? To any of these
There
organizations, I would presume.
I think so. I mean, I part of it, I want to say Lumos, of course. Like I really believe in the work that my organization does, and I
Of
know with that
course.
money it can really support us to help more children. Um, but I think the key thing is I don't want people to lose trust or think that I'm just here to fundraise for my organization, because that's not what I want. I want people to think about their whole attitude to how they're spending money. So I think that any organization which is looking at solutions which keep children in families, which is providing support to parents, support to communities, which is trying to alleviate poverty, support children with disabilities. I think these are all much better organizations to spend your money at.
So, in closing, let me go over a couple of takeaways. I think that it's important that we hopefully we've talked about the myths of volunteerism industry so people can go look it up themselves. You can go to Loomis.org or rethinkorphanages.org, and those organizations are legitimate. Okay. So the final thought is, true service isn't about how the volunteer feels. It's about long-term dignity and the safety of a community being served. So when you pick up a magazine and you look at great pictures of somebody standing there with a bunch of children around them, think twice. Your legacy is better served if you just donate money to a legitimate charity, a 501(c)(3) here in the United States. I know that because I have one. and or any other charity. I mean, if you donated to your church, that's fine. Let people that work for your church that are overseas do that and let them send you pictures of what's going on. But don't go there. Don't waste your money going there. I'll say one thing finally. I have a charity I've had for 10 years, and I used to go there and I would spend so much money going there, and I would be there and I'd have to spend money on this and money on that. And then I realized I'm better off not going, because the money that I'm spending on my flight and my travel and my car and my hotel is money I should just be giving to them. So I haven't been there for 7 years. Now I speak to them all the time and I get pictures all the time and and I know where the money's going because it's my money and I control that money. But the point being that I realize that I shouldn't be going over there because my money is better spent to help the school, which is not an orphanage. It's just a primary school in Eswatini. And one day we'll talk about that. But anyway, do you have any other final comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I just want to really emphasize that, we really appreciate people's good intentions and how much people want to help.
I agree.
Um, And, I don't want to discourage anyone or make anyone feel they shouldn't bother. I just encourage people to, do their research, do their homework, and make sure that at the heart of what you're prioritizing when you think about how you want to help is the experience and the well being of the child. We can all get a little bit caught up in what we would enjoy the most, but we need to put the children and young people who these organizations are working for at the heart of every decision we make.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for taking the time. It's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that our best intentions can sometimes be used against the very people we want to protect. That's what we talked about today. But as we always say on this show, being older means being wiser. It means asking the hard questions and being willing to change how we do things when we know better. I want to thank you for joining me today, for the incredible work being done at Loomis. And the information will be on our website. And of course, they can get it on our blog. If you're planning to do a trip or looking for a way to give back, please do your homework. Look for organizations that support families, not institutions. If you found today's episode eye-opening, please share it with a friend or leave us a review. It helps to get the important conversations to people who need to hear them. I'm Ken Gluckman, and this is We Are Old, Get Over It. I'll see you next time, but I'm going to end with one more quote. Your time and energy are precious. Use them wisely. Do not volunteer in orphanages. Instead, dedicate your time to projects that tackle poverty and support communities with vital services. And that's another quote from somebody named J.K. Rowling. Is that the name?
I think
Okay.
so.
Hey, everyone. I'll see you next week. And again, thank you, Ashlyn, for being here on the show.
Thank you so much.
And that concludes this episode of We Are Old, Get Over It. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found our conversation both insightful and entertaining. Remember, age is a journey, not a destination. So embrace the wrinkles, the forgetfulness, and the occasional tech frustrations with a good dose of get over it attitude. Until next time, keep laughing, keep learning, and keep getting over it. Ken out.
This podcast features a variety of perspectives. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are solely their own and do not constitute an endorsement by this program. Unless otherwise stated, this podcast does not endorse the products and services of our guests, but shares them for informational purposes only.